Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Tang from Hughes, and today I have the privilege of speaking with David Henning, our Global Director of Cybersecurity Operations. David, can you tell us a little bit about your background, please?
Well, Tim, I started out as a very technical, hands-on person over 25 years ago in the industry. I brought in the first intrusion detection system at the Department of Agriculture down in D.C., and during that time, I've now grown to being global director for our security operations.
Can you tell us a little bit about that role? What does it entail? What are your responsibilities?
Primarily, it's really about checking in with my people on the investigations that they're running, making sure that they have the tools and support that they need to go through and do the detection and investigation into whatever may be going on in our environment and in the environments for our customers.
Can you talk a little bit about the security operations, the SOC? What are the functions that happen there?
The primary things would be, going through, detecting any, activity that looks anomalous, looks suspicious, deciding about, is this worth investigating further? And if it isn't worth investigating further, is it real? Is it something that isn't an attack either against our infrastructure and what we provide, or possibly against customers and what they're running at their system, at their locations?
What does a day in the life look like for you? Are you constantly fighting attacks, or where does most of the time get spent?
Well, there's a lot of data that comes in and needs to be analyzed. So that's the primary thing. Thankfully, with the architectures that we've developed for our customer base, it's not something that we see a lot of activity on, which is good. But then those times when we do, we have to be able to jump in and activate into the response mode of, how do you stop it? How do you, contain it? And how do you remediate?
Can you talk a little bit about that? When we detect an event, what is the process? What's the methodology for responding to an event?
So the first thing is contain. Get your arms around the problem, understand the scope, what's being impacted. How do you stop it from getting any worse? And the initial triage, stop the bleeding. At that point, then you go into a recovery mode of, how do we build back? How do we lock down whatever may have, been the vector of attack?
That's actually quite a bit to unpack there. Could you talk a little bit about just some of the fundamentals of good cyber hygiene? Where does it start?
You got to treat cybersecurity as a fundamental part of the business. You've got to see that the same as any other part of how you're running things. It has to just become part and parcel of how you operate. Cyber hygiene, making sure you've got things patched, making sure you've got things locked down. These are things that every business struggles with at various degrees. And, the thing about it is, if you don't do it, then, all these vulnerabilities build up and you just become more vulnerable over time. Right. And the real mentality to have is, there are other things that would cause an outage to your business. If you're a C-store and you've got coolers and you've got other things that you need to have up and running in order to run your business, well, you do things like you monitor, make sure they're working. You get maintenance on them to make sure that they stay, if it's a cooler and it needs the coils cleaned up and just to get the dust off of them, and it's going to extend the life of it another 6 months, you do it. Same thing for all your computers in your electronic infrastructure. You've got to keep things maintained so that you've got the best chance of not having an outage caused by an attacker. And and ultimately, in my mind, that's what the business should care about. I'm having an outage. I don't really care why I had the outage, but I'm having an outage. It's going to cost me money.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how you see the world of cybersecurity in terms of the threats? How are they evolving? How are they changing?
Yeah, over time, as I mentioned, I've got 25 years experience in the industry. And when I started out, the main motivators and the things you would see were things like, my website got hacked and defaced and it's embarrassing. A little bit of cost to go clean it up and take care of it. But it was mostly, people out there doing it for the fun, doing it for the laugh, in hacker speak, the lulz, right? And nowadays it's almost purely financial. You can argue, yes, they're a nation state that, depending on the nation state, may have a slight shift in their motivations. Certain nations are more known or suspected that they're after intellectual property. Other nations are more after direct money payments and things. But yeah, ultimately it comes down to dollars. And even small time actors and malware that wants to ransomware you and things like that. It's all money now.
Maybe one last question for you as we start to, if a small medium enterprise were just start wanting to basically improve their cybersecurity posture, how would they get started? How should they think about it?
So the best starting point that I can think of is, really get someone to do a proper assessment. Where are you? Right? I mean, if you don't know what you've got and where you're at today, how are you supposed to then, decide what to do? And you have to be able to take that risk assessment and look at, well, how many dollars am I risking and what is the solution to that going to cost me? And you got to find a solution that's going to come in under that risk, right? You don't, you don't go spending, millions of dollars on, fancy weapons to go, take down cheap targets, right? That's not how it should work.
It's at the end of the day a business decision. It's
Absolutely.
what's at risk and what's the appropriate amount of investment to protect against those risks.
Sure. Back to my other example, right? If you're sitting at in a C store and you have a risk that your cooler could go down because of whatever maintenance thing. If the maintenance was going to cost you more than buying a brand new cooler, well, then you would just wait till it dies and you can replace it.
Yeah.
Right? But it typically doesning. You typically say, oh, it's going to be cheaper to do this maintenance, to have a maintenance contract with whatever provider, and you go from there. Same thing in security. There are definitely things that you can't do yourself or you can't do them economically enough. And, that's when you can reach out to providers that have that capability for you.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Everyone, I've been speaking with David Henning. He's the Global Security Director of our Cybersecurity Operations here at Hughes.
Thanks, Tim.